Hello, welcome back to my tiny little festering boil of a channel. I'm so glad that you're here. It's so nice to have you. Mwah, hello. So the book we're going to talk about today is not one that's from recent years. This is from 1994, and the reason that we're going to talk about it is because the author of it won the Nobel Prize this year, Abdulrazak Gurnah. Fantastic name. And that book is Paradise, shortlisted for the Booker Prize of that year, and one of the ones that was listed in the citation, or at least was mentioned by the people conducting the committee as one of the major influences on their decision. So I was like, I have to read it, and I bought it online for way too much money, and of course now that it's happened, it's a lot cheaper, but I had to get it first, even though it took me like a whole lot of time to read, because I just kept putting it off. This book is about a young child named Yusuf, who is taken from his parents, who sell him to a merchant trader man called Uncle Aziz, and he travels around with him for a while, and they get into all kinds of zany, fun adventures, and they learn about colonialism and the power of friendship. With this book, I don't have much to say about it, but at the same time, I also don't really know where to start. It's good, it's not great. I don't know why it got the Nobel Prize. I feel like for something like this, there are more in-depth and cohesive examples, but this book was really odd. Not necessarily in terms of its like subject matter, just in what it chose to develop or not. So the largest portion of this book is devoted to the travels that Yusuf makes with this merchant Uncle Aziz around Africa, and through that they see the effects that colonialism is having on the country at the time. They can see the introduction of violence, the introduction of new weapons, the deterioration of certain old ideals. People are beginning to look towards the new, people like Uncle Aziz and certain people that Yusuf meets along the way. And so people like chieftains, old chieftains and older, more middle African towns are kind of fighting against that. And that kind of gets brought out by the trading party. So as they go through the country, they meet with resistance or praise and so on and so forth. And it's kind of sort of Conrad-y in the sense that the further that they go, the darker and the more violent it gets. The main problem with this book is that it really feels like the sum of its parts, and as it's happening, I don't care. That's the biggest thing. I just don't care. So what I mean to say is that I feel like it's a very realistic and undramatic way of showing how colonialism first affected Africa. So it's not like it's when I say that it's like colonialism begets violence, it's really not that obvious, at least at the beginning. It kind of becomes obvious by the end. But what I mean to say is that if that's a theme, it's not explored per se. It's not something that is a theme of the book. It's just something that they see. So it feels really realistic in the sense that what this trading party see happen to Africa is quite likely the way that it happened, how it was just subtle little things embodied mostly through certain people. It was not something accepted as a whole ideal yet. There's a moment near the end where a particularly violent chieftain named Chatu, he throws out Uncle Aziz and the trading party, and then some white men come in and basically kind of buy him up or force him to trade with them. And all of Uncle Aziz's party is like, aha, little pussy bitch. But what I mean to say is that there's like very specific examples of that, but it's so subdued and subtle that it's really kind of it's both a good thing and a bad thing. If you like that, if you really love how little you see of the major theme of the book, then go for it. His Nobel citation was something about, for his compassionate work about the lingering effects of colonialism and the consideration of the refugee and the gaps between cultures and continents. So the first half of that, the effects of colonialism, is this book, and then the second half about the refugee is By the Sea, I think. I haven't read that one yet. But with this book about the lingering effects of colonialism, the effects of colonialism happen they happen dramatically maybe twice in the book, and the rest of it is just kind of it simmers in such a subtle way in the background the characters don't even say it. My favourite part of the book is a moment where they do discuss it. It's when Yusuf is left behind for like a term or a summer from Uncle Aziz with someone called Hamid, I think. And he stays with Hamid on a mountain with his friends, and they discuss how colonialism is happening. And it's not necessarily, like, it's not as subtle as the rest of the book, but what I mean is it establishes the themes that then kind of are in the background for the rest of the book. And that's my favourite part of the book. But a lot of this book, there's at least 70 or 80 pages that feel really unnecessary and feel just like, yeah, I know what you mean. So even though it's really evocatively described, there's a moment where a guy gets his face torn off by a hyena, and another moment where this boy, like, sexually excites this older, kind of, like, nasty man he's on the trip with. And I'm like, alright, what's the point? Explain, please. Another major problem with the book is that the main character sucks. That, I don't mean sucks as in he's a bad person, I mean sucks as in he's terribly, terribly underwritten. There's almost nothing to him. At the beginning, it's like the first 50 pages is him living with his mother and father in a certain place. I think it's in East Africa. They're living in a certain spot there. And it's him as a boy doing boy things, and we learn about him as a person and how he's kind of a good soul, and he treats this homeless guy who's like addicted to the weed or the grass or whatever, and you kind of learn more about him. But the second he gets picked up by Uncle Aziz and they start on this trek, we learn nothing new about him. His character kind of like vanishes, like poof. It's more just a name that Abdulrazak uses to display a perspective on things that are happening. It's not a perspective that has any insight of its own or any kind of character of its own. It's just someone that's seeing the events and we're learning as he learns, right? Which I found really dry after a while. There's a section just before they meet Chatu for about 30-40 pages that I thought was really, really dry and very boring. But again, that main theme about the lingering effects of colonialism is sometimes really awesomely put, and then sometimes there's just a section where it's just not there. It's just, they're talking about something else. And I guess maybe it's so subtle to me that I'm just missing bits. I definitely feel that way about the ending, which we'll get to, that it just went over my head, like I just don't get it. But there are moments that are really great. One particular moment that stands out to me is a moment where I think it's Uncle Aziz describes the lineage of a town they're going through, and he describes all the mayors that have owned it. And it's just, the first generation was this person, the second generation was this, and it's this endless line. It goes on for so long. It's like a paragraph from the Old Testament, right? And then it ends with, yeah, and now the Germans use it as a camp. And I was like, that's awesome. Like the way that colonialism just removed all the myth and culture out of their society. Love that. That was such a great way of putting it. But on the other side, we have huge sections where that just isn't happening, and it's just devoted to the minutiae of them going round. Some of them got sick. This guy doesn't want to trade with us. Yusuf, you should go in because you're a boy and convince him. And it's like, yeah, I'm learning about their societies. It's very interesting, but for that to happen, there needs to be some kind of conflict with the colonialism you're talking about. If you're going to describe the society that in depth, you need to have at least some kind of dramatic example of how colonialism is going to change that. It can't just be a description of a society that you knew slowly turning into colonialism. Well, I mean, it can, and I'm sure that's what the Nobel Committee loved about the book. And it's kind of unique in that way, in that I'd say if it was more obvious, it would not have won the Nobel Prize, but it would have appealed to my stupid chimpanzee brain more. The major issue I have with the book, the major issue I think anyone who reads this will have with the book, is the bizarre ending that I just don't get. So Yusuf makes it home back to his friend Khalil, who's like this abusive piece of shit. And he makes it back to his friend after they've done all this trading, and he's like, I guess he's a changed man, even though we saw none of the change, we know nothing about his character, and he, I guess, falls in love, maybe, with Khalil's sister, while they're treating this old woman who is like kind of a seer or a prophetess or something. And he's fallen in love with her, and he agrees to run away with her. or he thinks that he's agreed to run away with her, but then when he goes to do it, she's like, no! And then Uncle Jesus is like, naughty boy, and then the army comes and that's the end of the book. Alright, that description did not do it any favours, but what I mean is, I didn't get it. I didn't know what the book was trying for. So on the back of the book, here's the Sunday Times quote. An oral archive of a lost Africa, tangling travel adventures, social documentary, political indictment, and a doomed love story. The fuck? Where's the doomed love story? What the fuck? I don't know what they mean. So the book ends in a place that is so utterly unlike everything that's been set up before it. It's this travel documentary of these people visiting their society and trading with it, and it's in like minute, very specific detail of just everything they do. And then they get home and Yusuf is like, I love you now, run away with me. And she's like, no, and then the book ends. And that woman is not set up. She's not a character we knew. It's, again, as I said with Untitled Blood is Black, I don't know why books have everything happen in the last 20 pages. Why do that? Pace it out. Make it longer. Indulge yourself. Fuck. Why just end like that? It was so weird, and I didn't know what it was trying to say, that it just ended with this bizarre moment where Yusuf is like, oh, I love you now. Was that meant to show character growth, that he's now, like, loving a woman? Because that's not a theme of the book. A theme of the book is he's witnessing the world being violent, so he perhaps becomes more violent, but he doesn't, right? I don't know what the themes are. I don't know what the themes are, other than colonialism is there and it's bad, right? And their society is complicated and colonialism is reducing that. Those are the two main themes. Anything else that the book tries to pop up fails miserably. The very ending of the book where the army comes and Khalil sees it, and he starts crying, and I was like, okay. Cool. I mean, you have an ending. I don't know how else you were going to end it. But nothing led to anything. Nothing progressed. It didn't feel like a character was being born. It didn't feel like a theme was being developed and brought to a conclusion and saying something. It doesn't feel like it's saying things. It just feels like a very specific documentarian description of how very specific German colonialism affected bits of Africa. It doesn't feel like it's going further than that. And again, dumb chimpanzee brain, I'm not like Fantano, I'm not a master of review, I don't know everything yet. Maybe this will improve for me as I figure out what it's trying to say more, but for the moment I was very confused by it. And when I finished it, I was left kind of sour. Yeah, so again, here's the little summary bit. Paradise is the story of Yusuf'S coming of age against the backdrop of an Africa of myth, dreams, and biblical and Quranic tradition, growing corrupt with violence and the influence of colonialism. The main issue I have there is the story of Yusuf'S coming of age. He does not come of age. Coming of age implies there's a character that changes. There is not. The characterization is very, very weak, and it feels deliberate, but I don't know why. The backdrop of an Africa of myth, dreams, and biblical and Quranic tradition, sure. Myth and dreams a little bit. From what people were talking about how strange and otherworldly and beautiful it was, I was expecting for there to be more of that, for there to be more surrealism or more descriptions of myth, but for the most part there isn't. People talk about their myths, but it's not something that's like I would have loved it if the character saw some surreal things, like if the book kind of indulged in magic realism a bit, but that's just because I love like these authors, so it's like, you know, it's just me being biased, but I feel like the book needed a little more to push it up and to feel like it's engaging me or keeping me interested. Other than that, if I was not someone who knew the society well, it doesn't have much to say to me. I don't feel like I regret or am more intolerant of colonialism now after reading this. I don't feel like I've learned anything about it. Well, I mean I have. I mean, like I understand how subtle it was at points, and how the growing corrupt with violence was not something that just happened. It was a very gradual change, and colonialism was a very gradual change that often echoed ahead of itself for months at a time. How the colonialism isn't even there yet, but it's the effect of it coming is there. I love that stuff. I love it. But again, it feels like it would need more dramatic story writing, more interesting events, a better character that have themes happen to them, that have themes run through them. Like their coming of age could be something to do with violence, you know what I mean? Not something so broad as that, but what I mean is that the characters could be a little more dramatic and interesting. But other than that, the book is just dry and honestly kind of boring. Having said that, glad I read it. Glad I got to see what the committee is interested in these days. It's interesting to see how someone who I had not heard about, someone who was very much, not a nobody, but someone who was just unknown to the larger populace, win the award. That was very interesting, and now reading it, I understand why they gave it to them, even though I would not personally agree myself. I think I'm going to give Paradise a 6 out of 10. It might be higher in a couple of years. Maybe I'll come back and understand it more. But for now, as my young, ickle baby chimpanzee head thinks, it is a 6 out of 10. Maybe there are some moments in this review where I show that I've utterly misinterpreted the book, and I'll get some comments from a few random people being like, you're wrong. But it doesn't matter because YouTube's going to disable the dislike bar, so you can do what you want, pussies. Thank you for watching, everybody. Make sure to subscribe if you are a colonialist, and hit that like button if you want to conquer Africa.